And I kind of apologize for the room. I feel like there's a moat here. So, but nobody should jump in. Okay, so welcome to the Strategic Growth Council. I see there. I'm shocked that there's a large group of people in the audience today, given that we're talking about money. Okay, so the focus of the council meeting today is cap and trade funds, as I think you all know. Obviously a subject of great interest to a lot of folks. The Strategic Growth Council has about $130 million from cap and trade funds to strategically provide as grants or loans. And the purpose of this meeting is to start the discussion of what the process will be. And I picked those words carefully because this is the outset of what will be a public process, and we'll have a very substantial places for public input. And whatever processes we determine now as we go forward, we'll have opportunities to make course changes and corrections. I know that when money is at stake, that people have strong opinions about things, both on the dais and in the public. And I would hope that we have a very good and constructive dialogue, because this is really a very substantial opportunity to make some decisions about a significant amount of money, all of which, and I'll say this probably 50 times and remind everybody every time we go off on some tangents, that the absolute most important piece of cap and trade funds is to address greenhouse gas emissions. That is the purpose of AB 32. That is the purpose of cap and trade. That is the purpose of what our expenditures will be. And then within that, there are a series of categories and other issues that are also very important, but they are all secondary to reduction of emissions. And so I'm sure you'll hear me and others say that again and again, but it's worth stating at the very outset. So let me do a couple of housekeeping things. There are on the agenda, there basically are just a couple of items, 2 and 3. And since items 2 and 3 are very connected to each other, what I'd like to do is for public comment on those items is to combine them. And we'll have all the public comments in the course of item 3 on the agenda. And I suspect there will be a fair amount of public comments. I want to ask people to be concise. I will say, without imposing a 3-minute limit at this point, that I'd like you to think about 3 minutes as the appropriate total, and try to keep it to that. And I think with that, let me turn it over, Mike, to you. Well, before that, do any council members want to make any comments? Okay, I'm sure you'll have your chance. It's unusual that we're doing this at 10 in the morning. Usually we do afternoon meetings, which gives us a little more time flexibility. So I don't want to cut folks off, and I want to give everybody a chance, but all the secretaries and the public member here on the dais have a pretty busy day and have some other things. So if we can keep this moving along, it would be greatly appreciated, and I will try to follow that as well. So Mike, to you.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. In the spirit of the highly integrated, very interagency collaborative nature of the SGC and its proposed management of this program. We will be sharing the responsibilities for this presentation across some of our member agencies, and we'll start with Alice and Joe speaking for the SGC staff.
Hi, thank you very much for
Good morning.
For being here. Actually, first of all, we wanted to just to the council, to the members of the public who are here, to those that we've heard from, and will continue to hear from over the course of the development of this program. We're SGC staff as well as key staff are excited to launch this program, to begin the discussions about what we should be doing and how we can implement the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program as provided in statute. So what I'd like to do, we have a panel of a number of presenters. We will keep it brief, but we want to give enough information to provide a foundation for the council as well as the public and others to understand where our directive comes from, what our statutory mandate is, and provide some opportunity for direction from the council as we begin to develop guidelines. So who I have here with me, Edie Chang from the Air Resources Board, Kate White from the California State Transportation Agency, Randy Deems from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, Susan Riggs from the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and Mike McCoy will also, from the SGC, will also be presenting. So we're going to do a bit of a dance here as we all come up, but we'll all be up here and available for questions at the end of the presentation. So, as mentioned,
before you, in terms of the public comment, I should mention Adrian to you. So Adrian's up here in the front. If you want to make a comment, just give her a card. Thank you. Sorry, Allison. Go ahead.
No worries. So what I'm going to do is turn the wheel. The wheel's not working. There we go. Is first, just to get everyone in the right frame of mind in terms of what we're working from, the proposed timeline for the development of the guidelines in this first year. What we're looking at is in mid-August, so next month, we will have really start thinking about and working on guideline development. And by we mean the Strategic Growth Council staff, as well as a group of state agency and department representatives who will help develop the workshops, or who will take the workshops and use this as an appropriate time for guideline development, but also allowing for additional engagement with stakeholders and to receive comments on the direction of the program. By early October 2014, we will have draft guidelines presented to the council. That is a bit of a shift in what we have noticed as our public meeting date, and so we are hoping to announce that rescheduled October date shortly. But at that point, we will have draft guidelines presented to the council. After those guidelines are presented, we will be conducting 3 public workshops on those draft guidelines, Northern, Central, and Southern California. We hope to vary the locations for both the guideline development and the draft guidelines presentations, and to achieve the greatest amount of participation. Hi. And we would like to do a lot of workshops. Yeah, there's nothing. Final guidelines will be presented to the council for approval in in December. I'm going backwards in time now. And then quickly in January of 2015, the funding solicitation would be released. We would have, we'll talk a little bit about details and responsibilities of those things. We hope that in early spring, or spring of 2015, March, April, we would have the deadline for the solicitations, and then by early summer, by May, June, actually have the awards announced. So, Natalie, if you could just manually advance, that would be great, and just through to the next. Thank you. I wanted to just, again, I think we've received a good sense of what we mean and what the SGC program means in terms of the larger cap and trade and greenhouse gas reduction fund investments. But I wanted to show the next table, which shows where we fit into that. In this current fiscal year of 2014-15, a total of $832 million was approved and signed by both the legislature and, thank you, and signed by the governor, of which $130 million is for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. This is a significant part of the Sustainable Communities and Clean Transportation categories, which was recognized by the Cap and Trade Investment Plan that was developed by Department of Finance and the Air Resources Board. Also of note are the significant investments in energy efficiency and clean energy and the natural resources and waste diversion. Next slide, please. Really, again, back to the basics here in terms of the legal background for this program. Thank you. Always nice to have the right remote. Going to go over the really basics of why we're here, really thinking about the implementation of AB 32, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and the targets that were set by the resulting law, as well as SB 375, which really was looking at transportation and land use as a connected and integrated effort. So what we're looking at here is just the basis for why we're doing this. What we are looking at from the last 2 years ago, SB 535, which really supports and sets in place the requirements for investment in disadvantaged communities in terms of how we identify them, what we do, who benefits. And then also AB 1532, which really does establish the public process and the development of the investment plan as mentioned, and the direction of funds to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, achieve co-benefits, and really implement AB 32. Finally, along with that and in conjunction with that, there was SB 1018, which looked at establishing the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, accountability requirements for that. This is something that we're particularly sensitive to and really aware of as we move forward. The accountability requirements for that is something that we are kind of the primary guideline for a lot of what we do here. Finally, the SB 862, the trailer bill from the recently approved budget, which created the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. What we'll go ahead and do is actually have a bit more detail about the program, but essentially, as we keep track of legislative actions, this one was the one that creates us. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask Edie Chang to come up and chat now.
Okay, so in the rotating carousel of agencies, my name is Edie Chang. I'm a Deputy Executive Officer with the Air Resources Board. Happy to be here today to talk about the Air Resources Board and our role in this. I just wanted to make sure the slide wasn't there. So I'm going to hit on a couple areas. I've got actually a handout, which is available at the back, and I think that the SGC, the council members, have it also. And so this really provides detail about what our statutory responsibilities are related to auction proceeds, and also the timelines in the near term for program implementation. So I'm not going to go over this whole piece of paper because you can all read much faster than I can. What I wanted to do is just highlight a couple areas that I thought were important. First, under the statutory role, one of our primary statutory responsibilities is establishing funding guidelines for the expenditure of auction proceeds. Some of it is establishing the record to make sure that we can show that these proceeds are being spent to further the purposes of AB 32. Another really important component is establishing guidelines for 535 so that agencies are consistently interpreting the requirements to spend monies in disadvantaged communities and to benefit disadvantaged communities. Another important component of those guidelines is quantification methodologies to make sure that agencies, that we're all quantifying our greenhouse gas reductions in an established way and in consistent ways, especially where there are similarities in the kinds of sources that we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions from. I also wanted to point out that the statute asks us to collaborate and consult with SGC. And we're pleased to do that both in forums like this and also in the development of the guidelines and the selection of projects. And we have staff that have been working on SB 375 They're very busy with lots of 375 issues this year, but are also going to be working with your staff to develop the guidelines and help select projects. I also just wanted to point out the very last bullet in that section, which is at the end of this year, we're going to start developing the next triennial investment plan. So on the cycle that is the development of these budget plans and the investment plans, will be starting development of the next 3-year investment plan at the end of this year, and so it's really an opportunity to learn from what we're doing now and the process that we've gone through, and to see what more we might want to do in the investment plan. The second half of the page has the near-term milestones, and we think that this really meshes well with the schedule that Allison showed earlier. We, like everybody else, we're staffing up to try to get folks in place who can actually accomplish all of the things that need to be done this year. And what we've tried to do is sequence this timeline to make sure that agencies are ready to go and that we've got the guidance that's available. So we've sort of scheduled the guidance so that there's an interim set of guidance that will be available in the August timeframe. One of the important pieces of that is we want to put out interim guidance in draft form in August for 535, so for disadvantaged communities. Provide that in August for public comment, and then finalize that interim guidance in September, so it's available for agencies to use starting in September. We would also be developing the full program guidance, and there will be a full public process with that, with a plan to go to our board in spring of 2015. Let's see, what else do I have? The other thing I wanted to point out is that we're going to be developing quantification methodologies starting this fall. So we're focusing on sort of getting our ducks in a row so folks can start getting money out the door later this summer and early this fall. We'll start development of the quantification methodologies. I think you all saw from the table that Allison put up, there are a multitude of different projects within every one of those funding categories. There's lots of different projects that agencies are looking at, and so there's, I think, over 50 different kinds of projects that we're going to be developing quantification methodologies. We're going to sequence them so that the ones that are the highest priority, we're working on those first, and we would expect that the kinds of projects that SGC is looking at are going to be early in the queue. So that's what I had in terms of the schedule and our role, and so I'm going to pass this to Kate right now, and I'll be available for any questions later.
Thanks so much, Edie. We will be looking forward to working closely with ARB on that guidance in the months to come.
Kate, can I have you introduce yourself for the
Yes,
record?
sorry. Kate White. I am Deputy Secretary at the State Transportation Agency. Very pleased to be here. Thank you, Chairman Alex and council members. I am going to talk just really one slide about the evolution of state support for sustainable communities and how this program, it builds on over a decade of cross-sector, cross-agency, cross-departmental collaboration to support sustainable communities. So this represents the evolution. Over the last few months, Strategic Growth Council key staff has been looking at the history and where we came from, and some of this goes back to 2000 with research and best practices, planning, implementation, and where we are today. A very exciting moment in the evolution of sustainable community support. Just to point out a couple things on this slide, the statewide TOD study and database, that is year 2000, that Caltrans developed. Another couple great examples on this slide under planning is the HCD Integrated Regional Partnership Program also from 2000, and the Caltrans Regional Blueprint Program from 2004. Some of you may remember all these things. Which were all grants to support MPOs for developing integrated transportation and land use regional plans, kind of the precursor to SB 375. For example, some of these programs funded SACOG's first regional blueprint and MTC and ABAG's priority development, priority conservation area planning work. This year, under implementation, CTC, the California Transportation Commission, and Caltrans launched the Active Transportation Program, which is a $350 million fund for walking and biking infrastructure. Of course, in 2008, the passage of SB 375 and the birth of the Strategic Growth Council really was a game changer. And the programs that you're obviously probably most familiar with up here, under planning, SGC's Sustainable Communities Planning Grants, and under implementation, the Urban Greening Program. Together, those two programs represent $130 million in statewide competitive grants that you've approved over the last 4 years to MPOs, to cities, to advance sustainable communities. So it's a very exciting moment in this evolution, and we want to build on this decade of best practices and lessons learned from all these programs and more. And with that, I will turn it over to Randy Deems, who's the Chief Deputy Director at HCD, who is going to briefly highlight a recent example that's also up here, right in the middle under implementation, really a model program we can build upon, which is the state's transit-oriented development and infill infrastructure program.
Can I just ask the speakers, and this is kind of an admonition that I hear ringing in my ears from the governor, that we try to at least define the acronyms. So I heard, because not everybody speaks our language, so TOD is
Transit-oriented development.
MPO.
Metropolitan Planning Organization.
And HCD.
Housing and Community Development.
Okay, so
Randy.
okay, so Kate is officially a member of. Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to hear the rest of that quiz. Good morning, Randy Deems, Chief Deputy Director, Housing and Community Development. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about some of our experience. I think it's very fair to say a lot of people think affordable housing when they hear about HCD, or they think HCD. And I think I want to start off by saying that our mission is broader than that. It is community development as well, and that includes infrastructure, that includes economic development. And there are programs that we have administered for years in those areas. What I wanted to do is take a couple minutes to see if I get this right. Talk about two programs recently that sort of illustrate this. The Transit-Oriented Development Program and the Infill Infrastructure programs were funded out of Prop 1C, which was a housing bond passed in 2006. The TOD program was allocated $300 million, and the Infill program $850 million. These programs were built from the ground up after Prop 1C, and TOD, with a real focus on reducing vehicle miles traveled, certainly required us to do program development much in the way that we're about to embark on, and certainly required us to reach out to partner agencies, most notably Caltrans, on figuring out the transit part of that and to really make that work, and we believe that's been very successful. The TOD program has actually two ways that applicants can receive funds. They can get housing loans, and they can get infrastructure grants. The Infill program is all infrastructure grants. Ultimately, what we saw in the TOD program was about 2/3 of the money went to loans and 1/3 to the infrastructure grants. So all in all, between the two programs, we did about $800 million in actual infrastructure funding. Important to note here is that leveraging was an important part of this program, and so we saw through these awards and through these projects that we leveraged close to 5 to 1 in these programs. The TOD projects were required to be within a 1/4 mile of qualifying transit station, and the infill had requirements as what a qualified infill site would be. The loan fund component of the TOD program was very much modeled after our normal multifamily housing program. But the grant funds fund a wide variety of infrastructure, including streets, sidewalks, sewer, utilities, bike and pedestrian improvements, transit stations and linkages, parks and traffic mitigation, all in support of the qualifying project. So we did 3 rounds of funding here, and as I said, about 80% infrastructure and 20% housing loans.
Can I ask you how you leverage 5 to 1? What does that represent?
So I believe that's the total total development cost of the project area over what our contribution was. So just quickly, I wanted to provide a few quick examples. These are four projects that have TOD funding in them, and I think one that has infill as well. All 4 of these projects are within a quarter mile of a transit station, and all of them are also within a half mile of shopping and schools, which are, those types of amenities are part of what makes projects competitive in these programs. I think I want to focus a little bit on the 2 projects on the right. MacArthur Transit Village in Oakland, as you can see, $17 million in TOD grant and $17 million in infill grant. So $34 million total in infrastructure grants to this project. That project supports 448 total units, 89 of which are affordable. So these 2 projects on the right are mixed income and mixed use projects. The improvements here are of note in both these projects, are very transit focused. And to highlight that, I think the Union City Intermodal was a situation where there was very prime development land for housing, but the access to the station there was not workable. So our $8 million in TOD grant went to improving the station, a new entrance to the BART station, station platform expansion, pedestrian and bike access, and circulation improvements. So those are the connections that these programs were designed to make. It wasn't that we needed to fund housing. Housing was part of it. We're trying to connect the housing and transit together. But often it was, how do you make those come together? That really was what we were focused on funding. So we're very pleased. We believe these programs furthered the evolution of the state's efforts in sustainable communities. And by not funding just one activity, but really incentivizing, facilitating the planning and development of the entire package that is really necessary to actually change behavior and get the greenhouse gas reductions. With that, we're very excited in being part of the team of developing the next step. And for that, I'll hand it over to Susan Riggs.
Good morning, Chairman Alex and members of the council. My name is Susan Riggs. I'm Deputy Secretary for Housing Policy with Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. That's a mouthful. So a primary purpose of today's meeting is to present a draft concept for your discussion. This is our best thinking to date, given the statutory framework and the experience gained under the related programs that Kate spoke about earlier. It's a work in progress and will evolve as we receive your input and members of the public's input at our August and October public comment workshops. On your screen, you'll see an articulation of a programmatic concept directly drawn from statute that has served as the basis of our conversations to date. The concept really emphasizes making connections between land use, housing, transportation, and land preservation in a way that really emphasizes the reduction of vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas reductions. The program structure is guided first by the statutory framework laid out in primarily in SB 862. First and foremost, of course, is the requirement that all investments demonstrate greenhouse gas reductions. In addition, consistency with state planning priorities is very important. All of the projects are required to implement regional sustainable community strategies, or to the extent that an area is not required to do one, some sort of planning document that is intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Of the revenue, 50% is required to be invested to benefit disadvantaged communities. And also, 50% is required to be invested in a way that assists in housing lower income individuals and households. In addition, the statute provides significant guidance on the types of projects that are eligible for funding. What you see on the screen here is drawn, it's paraphrased from the statute. Uses include affordable housing, transit, active transportation, non-infrastructure, active transportation projects, transit-oriented development projects, complete streets, and then a broad category for other greenhouse gas and criteria air pollutant reduction projects or programs, agricultural land protection strategies, and sustainable community strategies implementation plans. Takes a lot longer to actually say all the words, doesn't it? Beyond the statutory framework, there's a lot of latitude in how the program is designed, and today we're seeking some high-level input on a number of programmatic elements. Again, this is our best thinking to date and will evolve, but your early input is really appreciated in order to ensure that we can keep on the timeline, the very aggressive timeline that we showed to you earlier today. So first and foremost, SGC, the Strategic Growth Council, would maintain the central administrating role, and this body, the Strategic Growth Council, would make all high-level decisions, including providing input on the programmatic framework, adoption and input and adoption of the guidelines, the final approval of awardees. All of the high-level decisions would be vested in this body. However, the statute does give authority to leverage the expertise of Strategic Growth Council partners in implementing the program. To that, we recommend the program be administered on behalf of the Strategic Growth Council and 2 complementary components by Strategic Growth Council partners. First, it's recommended that an agricultural preservation program be administered by Natural Resources. This program component would be focused on tools to preserve agricultural lands that are in danger of conversion due to sprawl development activities. Secondly, it's recommended that the balance of the program be administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. This component would include all other eligible uses, including affordable housing, active transportation, transit infrastructure, et cetera.
Let me interrupt you for a second there, because I think one of the issues that I think we're going to hear about and people have some questions about is what does it mean to be administered by? So if you could discuss that a little bit, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, so there are a lot of technical components required to administer a development related program. So everything from underwriting guidelines to the contracting with each of the applicants, the review, ensuring that the scoring and review of the applications is seen as impartial and viewed and as a as a trustworthy process and so I think all of those technical components, the day-to-day outreach and interaction with potential applicants and awardees, and then once the awards are made, of course there's a long period of time where there's going to be follow-up and making sure that benchmarks are met, making sure that timeframes are being met and the money is being spent in the way it's intended to be spent. And so those are really the day-to-day activities that are technical activities that take up a lot of time and expertise, that certainly HCD and Natural Resources have.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up? And it's sort of, you've said it already, but let me try it a different way. Sure. Because for the sort of fire drill that some of us went through yesterday and phone calls and visits, the major point was somehow you're taking this money and you're giving it to housing and community development without oversight or without direct involvement from the Strategic Growth Council, and you'll never see it again. And it'll be lodged there, and it'll never be changed. So let me try to characterize slightly differently what you just said and make sure it's true. Because if we are reserving, we do not have the staff to do everything that you just said. We would have to hire a lot of additional staff when we're under this tight time deadline, and as it is, I'm not very happy about the fact that budget hearings are going to be in front of the legislature next spring, and we won't have made the final awards, and people say, what did you do during the year? Well, we responded to what everybody asked for a robust public process, and as a result, we're going to have to say we're almost there after we've had this money for the bulk of the fiscal year and are already talking about it next year. The point is that we're reserving all the high-level decisions here. They are not being surrendered in every way, but for the expertise that our staff doesn't have or the capacity or the breadth, that's where you're doing it within the overall direction or approval of the Strategic Growth Council. Is that a correct statement?
That is a very helpful and accurate characterization.
Okay. Because that seemed to not be understood by people that were contacting me yesterday. So, and believe me, there's going to be a robust public comment period here, and people can raise where they don't think that that fits or is an issue. But thank you for answering.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so just finishing up this slide. Other recommendations that are in front of you today from the staff include that we would recommend distribution through a competitive process, so that projects are really competing against each other to make sure that they're the best that they can be, that they're, the projects selected are really the cream of the crop that are achieving the goals of greenhouse gas reduction and VMT, vehicle miles traveled reduction. So along those lines, we would recommend that funding be distributed through both loans and grants as appropriate, depending on the eligible use that's being funded. We also would recommend, a strong emphasis on integration. We want to see that, the projects really are representative of many of the eligible uses. We don't want, a single purpose project. We want, a holistic project that is addressing many of the community's needs and really is reflective of the sustainable community strategies that the regional governments have laid out. In addition, we're hopeful that many of the applications will come forward from integrated parties. That they'll be representative of local government, of nonprofits, cross public policy, cross sector, and really be representative of the communities that they're making recommendations or proposals for. And then finally, integration really means that it really is the first true test of integrating the partners around the Strategic Growth Council table. And we really want to emphasize the collaborative of SGC, of the Strategic Growth Council. Beyond the statutory requirements, the trailer bill of SB 862 provides a number of public policy goals that can serve as the basis for additional threshold criteria, kind of serving as a bar, or scored criteria in a competitive environment to be used in scoring applications. Achieving these objectives will work to create numerous co-benefits as funded projects are implemented, and the particular application of these objectives will significantly influence programmatic outcomes. We'll be seeking input from the public on the selection and weighting of criteria throughout our August workshops, and so there'll be lots of opportunity for the public to weigh in on what those things are, and we look forward to getting input from you today as well. With that, I am going to turn it over to Mike McCoy, Executive Director of the Strategic Growth Council. Thank you.
Thanks to Susan and the rest of the team. I am pleased to be able to make a few concluding comments on the concept that we're bringing before you today. Secretary Laird actually covered much of what I was going to say with this slide. Thank you very much, Secretary. I'll just go into a little more detail on what he enunciated, and that is that we definitely know, both in statute and because of agreement among the council, that the council will retain all important authority over this program and all responsibility for the success of this program. The SB 732, which created the council, had an instruction that we should look across funding in our various agencies and look for opportunities to coordinate granting and to bring the kind of holistic solutions to communities that Susan just spoke about. I feel like we've been handed a great gift and a great responsibility in the sense that we now get to fulfill that element of SB 732 that was laid out years ago, but for which there has never been a really great opportunity like this. The SGC has had, since almost its inception, a concept of key staff. That is, each one of you has a designee that is responsible to represent not just you, but the work that your agency can do, the expertise that's in your agency, the information we can draw out of your agency. And so when we say SGC has a small staff, we could also say SGC has a very large staff, since it embodies the assistance of the staffs of all your agencies. And we intend to tap into that in this program, whether it's public health or food and agriculture. Wherever we have a need to advise and inform in this process, we expect that we'll have that resource available to us through the SGC staff and the member agency staff. Then finally, in this framework of work, are the implementing agencies who will effectively take the decisions, the policies, and the priorities of the council as developed and brought to the council by the SGC staff and member staff. And they will actually do the work that needs to be done to put these programs on the ground and to get construction underway at the earliest possible date. The roles don't stop with the roles and responsibilities of state agencies. SB 862 instructs the council to coordinate with metropolitan planning organizations and other regional agencies to identify and recommend projects within their jurisdictions that best reflect the goals and objectives of this program. And it makes a similar instruction with regards to local government and other institutional entities. We are very excited about this opportunity to, in a way, expand what our concept of council is. Our concept of council in this program will reach not only across state government, but into regional and local government, and we're pleased for that opportunity. We have met with the executive officer of CalCog, and he has offered to assemble the executives of his member agencies in the near future. We're hoping to do this in the month of August, to discuss what these words mean: coordinate and recommend. We need to develop processes for participation of regional government, of the MPOs, and of local government. And we feel that this is a very generous offer. We thank Bill Higgins for making that offer, and we look forward to proceeding with that discussion. And finally, because I can't look at this often enough to remind myself of how urgent everything we do is, and how Secretary Laird would like it to be even more urgent, and believe me, if we can, we will. This is a very aggressive schedule because we're trying to balance a vigorous public participation program with all the transparency that promises, while at the same time move swiftly towards implementing greenhouse gas reducing programs, which after all is something every one of us in this room cares about. So we're going to try and walk that line between dispatch and participation, and we hope that we get it right. It's going to require a great deal of intergovernmental coordination, and the development of an active and constructive relationship with constituent groups and members of the public. Finally, with that, I'd like to turn this back over to the council for consideration of our proposed action item, for discussion and for comment, and for an opportunity to hear from the public.
So let me just start by thanking staff, both of the Strategic Growth Council and of the agencies. You've already put a lot of work in it, and obviously, as you note, it's an ambitious timeline, and it's going to require a lot of coordination and effort as well. So let me, Mike, before I open it up to the other council members, can I ask you, are you laying out, do you have a specific action proposal? Are you going into the, do we have something specific that you want us to look at? Or how are we going to get to the action item under number 3?
I believe that you should have before you a very brief staff report on the subject of the proposed action item. The action item itself is so short, it's entirely contained in the agenda. So really that is your work there before you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, let me turn to the council members and see what questions and comments people have before we move to the action item. See if there are questions or comments from council members. Secretary Laird.
Thank you.
I'm being very formal today.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. The sort of one point I wanted to make, and I just hope that if in fact we don't have the grant awards made by the time of the legislative budget hearings next year, everybody that wanted the robust public participation will testify that we responded to them, and that's one of the reasons the awards haven't been made yet, so that is really clear. But the point I wanted to make is there's almost been no conversation about the ag land preservation piece of this while everything just happened. And compared to the rest of it, it is really small. But I think it is important to mention that actually time is a considerable challenge with that issue. The Williamson Act that we have, as I keep saying, is hanging by a thread, and we have to figure out what is coming next in terms of it morphing, it continuing, a new thing being put in its place, because this is inextricably tied to greenhouse gas emissions, and there's just demonstrable evidence that the difference between unconverted ag land in its current use and converted to urban use is a substantial difference in greenhouse gas emissions. And if you have a very effective program to protect against the conversion of prime ag land, you in essence are meeting the goals of this legislation strongly. And because various counties are making their decisions about continuing to participate, time is really important, and it is in the recommendation separated so that it would come to the Natural Resources Agency, and I think we are fine with that. But of course we recognize that the Department of Conservation will play a role. They are part of the Natural Resources Agency. If we can just get it to the agency, we will figure it out. And so I just think those were important points to be made, and that this offers us the opportunity to keep this issue out in front. And later today, the California Roundtable on Agriculture will release a call to action on the conservation of ag land. And I think that a part of the problem has been as much a political problem, which is that it seems like there's rather universal support for protection of ag land from conversion to urban uses, and a lot of groups have it as their 14th priority, even though there's agreement on it. And the thing that happens too is that people put out a great menu of all the things we can do without necessarily attaching to it what is of the utmost priority and what is achievable. And I had a rather animated conversation with one advocate on this, where he told me what other states do, and I had to ask him which of the other states had Prop 13 in effect, because he made it sound like they're able to make a major commitment in money and we aren't, and we're making a conscious choice to do that. Well, the voters have made a conscious choice of how we govern our finances in California. And so I really think that the call to action has to include a prioritization of 2 or 3 things that are achievable and fundable rather than a menu of just everything that's out there in the universe, because we could do that ourselves. I just want to acknowledge that this is a piece of it. I really honor the administration and the legislators for sort of putting that there in the process that brought us to today. And we're grappling because $38 million is in essence what the Williamson Act cost at the time the legislature and the previous governor stopped funding it. $38 million a year, and if we have $5 million here, if we are able to accomplish that, that's a drop in the bucket, and that is really us trying to decide what's a priority for coming next, and it might be holding people in as best we can to the existing process while we decide with more limited resources what it is that we can do going forward. And I think in some ways we really have to look at prioritizing ag land that's most at risk of conversion immediately adjacent to urban areas and trying to do something strong to protect that. But I say that sometimes just to provoke people, because if they don't like that, then what is it that moves up in priority that is comparable to that and is doable? So I just wanted to at least speak to that part before we have public comment and move to action. And I really hope when we get there that we just approve the recommendation with regard to the ag land preservation, and we are taking it as a mission. I also do not want to sit at any hearings at budgets next spring without having done something significant on this, so that I can explain to the legislature why we are moving forward somehow.
Secretary Ross.
Just to save time, I want to associate myself with your statement.
Okay. Jan.
Thank you for the presentation. That was very thorough. One of the things that struck me was that there is a strong direction and intent to really support disadvantaged communities, which I think raises 2 issues, both how we actually define those communities and identify them, but also how we support those communities. So I don't expect that this will be resolved today, but to sort of toss it into the mix that as you deal with disadvantaged communities, we know that they have difficulty bringing grants together, project planning, and so to start thinking from the outset about how to offer technical support so that the outreach is really feasible and those disadvantaged communities can take the best advantage of this opportunity.
Secretary Caballero.
I'll be very brief as well and associate myself with the things that John said, because I think the real issue here is the budget passed a little over 2 weeks ago, and the fact that we're having a hearing with this much information coming together in such a short period of time is a real indication of the commitment of the staff of all of our agencies coming together. They're very talented, and they're putting their best thinking caps on, and so I really want to recognize and acknowledge everybody that's gotten us to this point. There's a lot of work left to do, and we're going to have a lot of opportunity at this council level for us to talk about where we're going and how we're going to get there. And so I agree that disadvantaged communities is a big issue, and looking at them the way that we're going to be looking from this lens will be different than we've done it in the past. And the timeline is so aggressive that we really do need to take the talent that we have within our agencies and departments and make sure that they're doing the heavy lifting that needs to get done. So I just want to say that because, John, I didn't get any of the calls that you got yesterday, and probably for obvious reasons. I know that there are concerns out there, but just let me say that that this council is going to be overseeing all of the work that's getting done. And so that's the commitment that I think we all make to this process. So thank you.
Secretary Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman Alex. Just to build on a comment that you started this proceeding with, and that is that we are very, very aware at the council that the touchstone for all of this work we're about to embark upon is AB 32 and implementation of AB 32. And you've heard an awful lot of discussion of housing, and you've heard an awful lot of discussion today about agriculture just recently. But we are all very, very mindful of the fact that this all comes within the umbrella and scope of implementation of AB 32. And there's a very, very good reason for that. As we've described implementation of AB 32 in meetings and conferences over the last several years, we have consistently identified that there are a number of ways that you can address climate change and the problem presented by greenhouse gas emissions. The most obvious way is to change the fuels that you're using so that you're not emitting greenhouse gas. Another way to do it is to be more efficient so that you have to use less energy so that you are emitting fewer greenhouse gases. But another way is just to look at how are you living? How much energy do you have to use? Can we live our lives in a way that we can reduce the amount of emissions that get produced by our everyday activities? And that's where this proposal is a very, very critical component to that overall approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is something that's been widely identified. What struck me over the last year is in discussions with other countries. Just this week I had a discussion with representatives from the German state of Baden-Württemberg, and they talked about the significance of appropriate land use planning and how important that is to reducing vehicle miles traveled, how that's important to the way that we live, how that's important to the way that we support mass transit. It's a critical component in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's been interesting to me that China has 42 low-carbon cities designated, and that's a recognition of the fact that how you design your cities, how you design your communities is critical to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that there was perhaps some loose terminology used in the description of what we're doing here today when we talked about delegation and we talked about administration. But at the end of the day, what you will see here in the actions of the Strategic Growth Council is a number of agencies coming together in these meetings to make decisions on issues like land use, preservation of ag lands, conversion of ag lands, but that will all come within the scope of our mission, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the end of the day, to address climate change problems. And so everybody should be assured that we are very, very mindful of the fact that that is our goal and our key mission in implementing these programs.
I guess I'm not having agency responsibility gives me a little bit more free rein, and when I look at the staff recommendations, there are things that I'm comfortable with in the staff recommendations, and there are things that I'm maybe less comfortable with. As I read the last line of the action item, implementation will include but not limited will include but not limited to working with council to develop program guidelines. I'm concerned about any single agency taking a lead in developing program guidelines, and I read the working with council phrase in there, But when I hear administration evaluating applications, I think that is work of that's purely work of cross-agency of the multi-agencies that are involved in the SGC. And I think that things like monitoring the agreements, the grants and loan administration, I can see delegating that, but I'm just very concerned about delegating these larger areas to any single agency. And having been through the process of the former grants that we did, the urban planning and the greening grants, the agency that is the lead influences the program in ways that maybe I just don't fully understand. And I want to be really clear that this is SGC work, that the SGC work from the beginning is about cross-agency collaboration, and this is in no way meant to devalue or depreciate the work that goes on under Secretary Caballero, who, in her short time on the council, has been very interested in our work, and I just want to be very careful here about delegating things to a single agency that that can't help but influence the type of work that's before it.
Bob, can I, being a lawyer and all, I want to put this in the form of a question. So I have some questions along some similar lines. First of all, the staff recommendation uses the word implement, and the slide used the word administer. And I wonder if anybody wants to comment on that nomenclature first, and whether there's significance to that or not.
Unfortunately, we did all come to agreement as a group across the agencies working on this that we would consistently use the word administer and administrate to refer to the activities of the council staff and working across the agencies. We would use the word implement when referring to the agencies who will carry out the day-to-day work that's necessary to do to actually contract and do the other elements of the program.
Okay, so the use of implement here is, in at least as you're using it, is the narrower version that
a narrower version. I think that we recognize, Mr. Fisher, that the act of administering construction contracts, for example, is something that none of us on the SGC staff have any experience with. We do want to be intimately involved with that. We will ask a lot of questions. What does it mean when you do this with the contractor? But we are not the people that can actually do that work. But certainly all other work that relates to the policies that drive that are going to be done collectively.
Okay, so let me ask what I think is the core of Bob's question, which is the language says this implementation will include but not be limited to working with the council to develop program guidelines. So what is the intent of that? What do you have in mind for HCD's responsibility or resources responsibility vis-a-vis the other agencies in developing the guidelines?
A good example is that in the 2 weeks that we've had the budget, the preliminary discussions that we've had on this subject, and in the couple of weeks leading up to that, we worked very diligently to not have undue influence from any existing set of guidelines of anyone's, whether it be the SGC's or housing and community development or transportation programs of various stripes. And we worked hard to generalize those concepts in the slides that you saw today, relying primarily on statutory guidance with some categorical elements that we thought you definitely are going to need to consider how far you want to be away from transit. That's a box. But we didn't even want to say how far. The guidelines in the former Todd housing program were a 1/4 mile. Other programs have had a 1/2 mile. we put nothing, because that's going to be part of your discussion, the public comment period, staff interaction. That's the way we want to conduct that process.
But maybe to get too far into the weeds, but physically, how are you going to? Is one entity going to write proposed guidelines and other agencies and departments comment on it, or how are you going to proceed?
We started out with just in coming up with the concept that we bring to you today. We started out with a seed document that was an amalgam of a couple of different programs. And decided that it had too much precision, and we didn't want to preclude valuable discussion by the council or the public, so we backed off from that. We didn't like the second version, so it was a lot of work, a lot of circulation and recirculation across the representatives of the agencies.
Okay, so it's across the representatives of the agencies, and you and the SGC staff were shepherding that, is that right?
That's right, yes. We do have, we have a work group that then further takes, just for dispatch, we have a smaller work group. Eventually having 10 people on a work group would be probably not terribly functional. But we have a smaller work group that brings forward concepts. We have the key staff meetings every other week with the larger staff, where we have an opportunity for broader input into these discussions. And then when these things rise to a level where a decision really has to be made, where we've come to some agreement among interagency staff that we've reached a point of proposition, then we'll be before you.
So not to hopefully not being obnoxious here, but what is the meaning of the phrase in the proposal work that resources and housing and community development will work with the council to develop program guidelines? Do they have a special role as opposed to other?
No, that is probably an unfortunate phrasing. I think that their role and the roles of all the other agencies are equal. I think that we just chose a poor phrasing of that. And if you wish to rephrase that, please. Please
yeah, I think we've got to be very clear about what administration, what the detailed aspects of administration mean with regards to the role that housing and community development are going to play versus the broad council representatives where everybody has, everybody including the public has equal say here.
Well, let me.
And,
totally
you know,
agree.
and when it comes to
recognized
the evaluating of applications and the development of program guidelines, I'm uncomfortable with any single agency playing a more significant role.
Well, let me comment on that, and we'll open it up for some discussion. First of all, I don't want to pick on HCD. I think it could be any agency or department here. But second, this is not. There is not equal expertise on these issues among the participants. So I do not have any expertise on affordable housing, and OPR actually does have some, but far less than housing and community development. So I think that, and resources and Department of Food and Ag have a lot more expertise on aspects of what we're talking about, and I think if we don't take advantage of that, we're kind of being stupid, and I'd prefer not to do that. So I think we have to find the appropriate mix so that it is across agency and department, that we're not siloed, that as I recall is one of our main purposes, but that we don't disregard really huge and extraordinary expertise. I'm looking at Edie and the expertise that the Air Board has on monitoring and determining how we're going to quantify. I mean, nobody else can do that. That has to be ARB. That is their expertise, and I think we need to take advantage of that and recognize that. So that's.
Well, it's beyond that, and I think it's part of a response to the concern voiced by Councilmember Fisher, and that is that, you know, by statute, we're required to develop this guidelines in consultation with ARB. And there is work that is being done right now to make sure that anything that's done by any of the programs that receive cap and trade funds will be looking at and receiving guidance from ARB. And in fact, we're going to be having a meeting at the end of this week to designate who at the various agencies that will be receiving cap and trade funds will be responsible for working with ARB as they're developing guidelines that will address how do you develop a record, how do you demonstrate that you're reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. And so our plan is to continue to work to make sure that there's collaboration between not just the SGC and ARB, but all the entities that are receiving program funding, so that as they're developing their guidelines, they will be done with an eye toward, at the end of the day, we need to demonstrate where we received greenhouse gas emissions. And also, Cal EPA will be working collaboratively with the agencies as well to address the disadvantaged communities part of all this. So it really is a collaborative effort. We already know who most of the staff are in the various program agencies. There will be a further coordinating meeting on Friday, and frankly, as Edie outlined, there's a process for developing the guidance that's required by statute, but built into that is the idea of some interim guidance, because we know that entities like the SGC want to get started designing their programs early. So ARB has agreed that they should do some interim guidance so that everybody can be working on this at the same time. So it is very much a collaborative effort. And so the way I look at this at the end of this day, circling back to this question about administration, we will be asking these entities to really do some of the day-to-day administration of these programs, but pursuant to guidance and direction that's been provided in the guidelines that have been adopted by this council. So I think that we will continue to be very, very much involved in oversight and providing direction as decisions are being made, and the ultimate decisions will always be retained by this council.
Sure. Sure. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to make a brief comment because some of this discussion in my mind is analogous to our last year's implementation of the Active Transportation Program, where we did assign the work of adopting guidelines, directing the drafting of guidelines to the entity that meets publicly, the California Transportation Commission, but we assign a lot of what's termed here implementation to Caltrans. And just as an example for why that is important, that call for projects concluded with, I believe, 700 applications for over $1 billion for a $360 million program. The department is working through with the California Transportation Commission that huge stack of projects now, but because of the staffing levels of departments and expertise of departments, they're actually pulling in about 50 people to go through some of the engineering verification, just to do that due diligence as those projects are being evaluated. And the final decision is at that public entity that holds the public hearings, the CTC. But again, being able to leverage that staff talent is very important for that project, to be able to stay on a timeline, such as the timeline here, to award some grants by the end of the fiscal year. You really do need to leverage that large group, that large workforce, and that large talent pool to get through that in a timely manner.
It does strike me, though, that we need to rework the wording of the sentence of in the action item. That would be my suggestion, at least. We don't have a motion on the floor yet, but that would probably be helpful, because I think it's causing. Yes. I'm not a lawyer. Several of you are. I would offer that
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we would more than welcome your modifications to that. And I just would add that we really are aware of the tremendous detailed number of activities that are involved in a program like this. I sat down one day and counted, I think, 37 things I'd like to see assigned to somebody or another in this process. We're going to have to work on which ones of those rise to the level of being important group decisions, which ones need to come all the way to you, which ones can be done by an implementing body, and these are going to be careful considerations of detailed work elements.
Well, let me ask you if this captures accurately what you're after. The Strategic Growth Council staff will coordinate collaborative efforts with agency and department staff to develop program guidelines. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then, Mr. Chair, before the public comment, so there's a motion, I would move the staff recommendation with that amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let me first ask if there's additional council comments or discussion of the motion.
Is it worthwhile to hear the public comments before we vote on this?
We absolutely will. I just want to see if.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so with that, let's move to public comment on items 2 and 3. I'm getting a stack of them now. If anybody has not provided a sheet to Adrian and is interested in commenting on this, please come up and give her a sheet now. So what I tend to do is call the speaker and then say who's on deck, and I will follow that process now and ask you to be pithy. So the first speaker is Will Barrett, followed by Bill McGavern.
Good morning. I'm Will Barrett with the American Lung Association, California. Really wanted to start by saying I appreciated the discussion and the clarification that came about Strategic Growth Council's role in all of this. We think that also Secretary Rodriguez framing of this within the AB 32 context was really helpful. The Lung Association supports allocations to cut greenhouse gases that also prioritize health and air quality benefits, especially to our most disadvantaged communities, per SB 535. We look forward to the discussions of the development of the guidelines for this program and the process that's coming forward. We believe that both the policy objectives highlighted in the presentation today and the emphasis on co-benefits and the planning grants, sorry, under the Council's planning grants are good foundations for moving forward. They really move forward on climate, health, and air quality benefits. I appreciated Mr. McCoy's discussion of the interagency expertise and especially the Public Health Department's involvement in this. Their work on sustainable communities and active transportation health benefits will be valuable as you go forward. We look forward to working with the Council and agency staff to ensure that the integrated guidelines really do maximize the greenhouse gas benefits, air quality benefits, and public health benefits going forward, and especially in our most disadvantaged communities. So thank you, and really want to say good luck. This is a big lift, and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill McGavern, followed by Liz O'Donoghue.
Good morning. Bill McGavern with Coalition for Clean Air. As the original sponsors of SB 535, the law that requires that some of the AB 32 revenues go to California's most disadvantaged communities, we're particularly excited that 50% of this funding is designated to benefit disadvantaged communities. As you know, though, that law, SB 535, requires that of the overall expenditures, at least 10% be spent in disadvantaged communities. And since that designation, that amount is still absent in all the materials, I want to ask the Council to make sure that as the public process goes forward, that you do identify what will be the funding that is spent directly in disadvantaged communities and exactly how that will be defined. And then in the benefit category, as you know, there still needs to be some defining of what exactly does benefit a disadvantaged community. And I know that there are a number of people at Cal EPA and ARB that have been thinking about this, as well as some of us on the outside, so we look forward to continuing that discussion. It's very good to see the categories that you're making eligible for funding. And in the SB 535 coalition, we have also prioritized funding for public transit and for affordable housing near transit. So we very much look forward to seeing that funding move forward. We would like to see the housing money be spent for those who are in the low income category, especially very low income and extremely low income. We're also very supportive of making sure that it's explicit that transit passes will be made eligible for this funding. And in both cases, we think that there are major greenhouse gas reduction benefits, because when you're talking about affordable housing near transit, you're talking about serving transit-dependent populations, and we want to make sure those people are not displaced, because in that case they will then have to have longer commutes and therefore more emissions associated with that. And similarly, with the transit passes, giving full or partial discounts will be a great way to allow people to get around without relying on single occupant vehicles and therefore reduce their emissions. So I will end my comments there, but associate myself in advance with other members of the SB 535 Coalition and Sustainable Communities for All Coalition you'll be hearing from later. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz O'Donoghue, followed by Janelle Fletcher.
Hi, good morning, Chairman Alex and members of the council. I too want to say that I appreciated the discussion we had, and so you'll hear in some of my comments those concerns and those requests reflected, but I'll say them anyway. So first, we strongly believe that the SGC is the appropriate body to administer this program, given its enacting legislation, its mission and focus on integration and multiple benefits. We also believe the program's guidelines and investments should be focused on achieving sustainable communities and delivering greenhouse gas emissions reductions with transparent metrics and accountability to meet our AB 32 goals. We also believe that the program should focus on the integration of multiple sectors to optimize the myriad benefits and greenhouse gas reductions. And we need to make sure that the investments are not single sector and they achieve the co-benefits of health, equity, conservation, and other goals. We do believe the Strategic Growth Council should retain the lead role in involving other agencies and sectors in developing the guidelines, oversight of project selection, measuring and reporting on the program to ensure that the goals of the programs are achieved. We support the proposal for the Department of Conservation to implement the Ag Preservation Program and urge that, like the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Community Funds, that the SGC also retain a leadership role in the development of the guidelines and ultimate decision on the investments. We also believe that the Ag Preservation and Affordable Housing Program work together and be integrated. We are a little concerned that they're going on separate paths, and really, if you look at what we're trying to achieve as a whole, they should be integrated. And to that end, the focus we urge that the program not fund projects that end up on conversion of farmland or open space. And then while funding agricultural preservation is a good first step, we need to allow investment in natural resources conservation to promote the type of growth and optimize greenhouse gas reductions in the context of sustainable communities. Conserving our natural land sequesters carbon, avoids the release of emissions from land conversion and vehicle miles traveled from potential sprawl development. Its conservation is fundamental to a healthy and sustainable community in the emissions reduction strategy. Two other points. One, we support the focus on disadvantaged communities and urge that resources be made available to really develop the best projects. And then, given the importance of this program on the expected future revenues, we ask that the SGC revisit the program and the administration and the infrastructure to deliver this after the first year's funding is dispersed. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a observation. We will definitely, this is an ongoing process. This is new, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting many times. So Janelle Fletcher, followed by Jeannie Merrill.
Good morning. My name is Chanel Fletcher, and I work for Climate Plan, a statewide coalition of nonprofit organizations working to advance sustainable communities. We appreciate the wealth of information today and support the Strategic Growth Council as the lead on the development of the guidelines with the involvement of other agencies and sectors. We believe that the public is essential to the development of the guidelines and support the multiple opportunities you have provided for public comment. As the guidelines are developed, we ask that the investments that reduce GHGs be measured by robust metrics that are transparent and provide accountability. We also urge strong guidance to ensure that multiple sectors are integrated to advance sustainable communities. For example, ensuring that plans that support infill development also support conservation. We also urge the Strategic Growth Council to address the concerns of disadvantaged communities by setting aside funds to provide things like technical assistance and other support as needed. Finally, as the chair also mentioned, just in general to promote a culture of learning, we really do ask that there is a commitment to a thoughtful and inclusive process to review the program guidelines, implementation structure, and investments after this first year to really ensure that the goals of this program are being met and that the implementation and or administrative role is correct. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jeannie Merrill, followed by Phoebe Seaton.
Hi, Jeannie Merrill with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. Thanks so much for allowing us to speak today. It's an exciting moment for many of us who've been working on these issues for a number of years. And we're very much in support of the staff proposal to have the Department of Conservation take the lead on the ag land preservation component of the program. But I want to echo some of the comments about the importance of integration between the housing, transportation, and ag land portions of the SES. The housing and transportation funding guidelines, we think, should include the requirement that proposed projects demonstrate how they'll avoid the conversion of agricultural land and open space. And the SCS funding should not fund projects that will convert ag land or open space, which would be counter to the goals of the program. In addition, the SCAP program should focus on long-term permanent protection of agricultural land at risk of development. And to date, conservation easements are our best tool to accomplish permanent protection. And finally, ag land conservation, we believe, is necessary to meet the objectives of compact, affordable development in California, and will help meet the objectives of investing in disadvantaged communities as required under SB 535. And as such, projects funded under the SCAP program in disadvantaged communities should be counted towards the goals of SB 535. Thank you.
Thank you. So Phoebe Seaton, followed by Mark Evanoff.
Thanks. Good morning. Phoebe Seaton with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. First off, Bill Higgins says that if he has to leave early, he echoes what I say. And second, we wanted to highlight the need
That's
to...
That's pretty blank check. You should, I think this is the time you go off script.
I plan to. We want to highlight that make sure that the Strategic Growth Council follows the broad allowances outlined in the Senate budget in the budget trailer to ensure sort of broad implementation of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, and make sure that programs and eligibility criteria are relevant to all California, not just the more rural and communities. We heard a great presentation on the success of the TOD program. One of my colleagues will speak later, mentioned that TOD program really only impacted in terms of 7 counties in the state. And that's just not going to work to make sure that this program is relevant to all Californians, especially those in the rural and less urban communities. Aside from that, we very look forward to working with all of you and support definitely that the Strategic Growth Council maintains a strong role throughout the implementation of this process. Thanks so much.
I don't know. I think Bill may be able to live with all that. Mark Evanoff, followed by Megan Kirkby.
Mark Evanoff, Redevelopment Manager with the City of Union City. Mr. Chairperson, members of the Council. The Strategic Growth Council has an opportunity to leverage $130 million of cap and trade dollars with an additional $750 million of 2011 bond funds to focus development on infill sites and to encourage affordable housing. Assembly Bill 2493 by Bloom and Senate Bill 1129 by Steinberg would allow successor agencies to expend 2011 bonds in consultation with metropolitan planning organizations if those bond funds are going to be used for TOD and consistent with the regional growth plans. Infill development is very expensive. By way of contrast, Union City has invested $167 million to date, converting 100 acres of vacant, environmentally contaminated land around the Union City BART station that had a negative land value into a vibrant, walkable community. The investment was spent on infrastructure, was spent on underwriting the cost of affordable housing, and improving access to BART. Remember, BART was built in 1972, and it was hard to get to. The grant funds from the Transit-Oriented Development Grant and Infill Infrastructure Grant removed pedestrian barriers, so what had once been a 1-mile walk to the platform is now going to be a 1/4-mile walk. More than 800 housing units have been built to date, of which 251 are affordable. 600 of those housing units have been built at a density greater than 72 units per acre. And the Station District has yet to be built out, and this is why we are requesting authority to expend the 2011 bonds. And the City Council of the City of Union City has formally requested the council as a body or as individuals to encourage the governor to sign the legislation into law. Just wanted to point out, this was a negative land value. We're now generating $2.7 million a year in property taxes, of which 90% of that revenue goes to the counties, special districts, and the schools. And that property tax is going to more than double if we're allowed to build out the Station District. Again, the funding mechanisms are in place. The mechanisms are in place to ensure that the bond money will only be spent on TOD and affordable housing. The metropolitan planning organizations are the enforcement body. There is no additional cost to the state, and this is an opportunity for the cities and the state and the metropolitan planning organizations to work together to implement state goals to build housing around transit. I've passed out some illustrations of Union City Station District. The building with the flower is Station Center. It is 155 units of affordable family housing, affordable to very low and extremely low income households. It's expensive to build. It was $60 million. The redevelopment agency underwrote the construction cost by $29 million. Just want to point out that at the bottom of the mural is, this was an exhibit created by the residents of Station Center of welcome in 35 different languages. I would invite the members of the Growth Council and the staff to come to Union City and to visit the Station District, and we appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much. Megan, it looks like Kirkaby. Thanks. Followed by Joshua Stark.
Hi, thank you. I'm Megan Kirkaby, Sustainable Housing Policy Manager for California Housing Partnership. We thank you for the opportunity to speak. We are extremely enthusiastic to support the staff recommendation to work with HCD, Natural Resources Agency, and Department of Conservation on this work. And we urge the guidelines to build on successful existing programs, some of which you've heard about today. The HCD's existing programs like the TOD program and the Department of Conservation's Farmland Conservancy program, the Active Transportation program. There's a huge amount of knowledge there. We also have an opportunity, as Phoebe Seaton mentioned, to investigate location-efficient strategies that work in rural communities, such as placing denser, affordable housing near jobs, services, schools, and transit, which will work differently in rural areas, but still does create significant drops in vehicle miles traveled. As discussed earlier with regard to housing, you have a very strong agency partner with HCD to administer the technical process that's necessary to develop and preserve the state's affordable housing. The staff recommendation is an extremely important continuation of efforts to integrate conservation, housing, and transportation, while still harnessing that existing expertise that is going to prevent unnecessary delay. So thank you very much for this staff recommendation.
Thank you. Joshua Stark, followed by Jeannie Ward-Waller.
Good morning, Joshua Stark, State Policy Director for Transform. We coordinate the Sustainable Communities for All Coalition and are founding members of Climate Plan. And we're happy to support staff's recommendations today, and we stand behind the comments of our many colleagues also here today speaking. We additionally recommend the Strategic Growth Council ensures the needs of disadvantaged communities are addressed. We believe this should go beyond 535 requirements, but could include also technical support to communities with less capacity for both for applying for through the process and then also downstream. Strong safeguards should also be instituted so that investments don't result in displacement of low-income residents. After all, these communities are not just places, they are an interaction of places and people. And if we lose those people, we lose those communities. Capacity, or excuse me, I'm sorry. We believe that transportation demand management also needs to play a vital role, including transportation passes and car sharing programs for low-income residents. The co-benefits of household financial savings from these strategies is absolutely critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeannie Ward-Waller with David Zisser next.
Hello, council members. Thank you for the discussion today and the great work done so far by staff. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jeannie Ward-Waller with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. We're really excited about this program and opportunities for active transportation and programs such as Safe Routes to School. We encourage that active transportation improvements be required on all projects that provide safe, comfortable connections between any housing funded and transit in the vicinity. Additionally, projects should be encouraged and scored competitively that really promote active transportation and physical activity as the most attractive travel mode and connect to family-oriented destinations such as schools and parks. Finally, I want to offer our assistance in engaging the active transportation and Safe Routes to School community in the public process to develop guidelines. We played that role with the CTC and Caltrans on the active transportation program, and I think it was a very successful, supportive relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. David Zisser, followed by Chuck Mills.
Good morning. I'm David Zisser. I'm at Public Advocates, civil rights organization based in San Francisco. And I'm Public Advocates is an active member of both the 535 Coalition and the Sustainable Communities for All Coalition. Thanks for letting me say a few words. To start, as some of my colleagues have said, we very much support the staff proposal, and Megan Kirkby did a good job of summarizing that, so I won't repeat that. Just a few key points. One, we are very excited about the investment opportunities that this money provides, but as Josh Stark said, we want to make sure that that investment does not result in the displacement of the communities intended to benefit, especially vulnerable communities at risk of displacement. So we'd like the SGC and its partner agencies to think about criteria and eligibility standards for essentially requiring projects to prevent displacement through no net loss of housing occupied by lower income households, and the requirement that where investments do occur, that those places have anti-displacement policies in place and housing elements approved by HCD. And just to sort of make it a little bit more concrete, some brief examples of what we're talking about when we talk about anti-displacement policies are things like renter protections, targeted hiring of low-income workers and job training to prepare them for those jobs, condo conversion laws, things like that. Replacement units for units that are lost is another example. Of course, affordable housing is a key component of keeping people in place, and to that end, as some of my colleagues have said, we'd like to make sure that housing that's built through this program serves the lowest income households at 50% of AMI and below. And other than equity reasons, as others have stated, there are real GHG reasons to do that too. A great report by CHPC and Transform lays that out really clearly, that the lowest income households use transit the most and drive the least. When they do drive, they're driving high polluting cars. So giving them the opportunity to access transit is key. Not only that, of course, the trailer bill language, SB 862, requires serving lower income households as well. We also, as others have said, support the inclusion of transit passes as an eligible use of this money. It's not specifically laid out in SB 862, and we hope that the SGC will help clarify that that is an eligible use, both, again, for that double bottom line of both environmental and GHG impacts and equity considerations. For students, staff, and faculty of universities and elementary and secondary schools, low-income youth, and residents of affordable housing near transit. Lastly, on the 535 requirements, we strongly encourage you all to, and working with the partner agencies, to develop scoring criteria that prioritizes projects that primarily benefit low-income residents and disadvantaged communities, or gives them access to high-opportunity areas. That, of course, is a mandate of SB 535 and a key component of meeting the goals of AB 32. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chuck Mills, followed by Lisa Hershey.
Good morning, Chuck Mills with California Relief. As many of my colleagues have already mentioned some of the points I'd raise, I'll accelerate the presentation of my comments. We do strongly support the staff recommendation to utilize the expertise and successful experiences of existing statewide agencies to work with SGC in administering the affordable housing and agricultural components of the program, specifically, of course, Housing and Community Development, Department of Conservation, and the Natural Resources Agency. Of course, we also support the Strategic Growth Council playing the leadership role in this and the distribution of these funds, which will allow for maximum transparency and of these allocations and GHG reductions. As the council begins moving forward toward its next steps of developing guidelines, we encourage you to consider these additional opportunities that may not be fully fleshed out in the recommendation before you today. First, the integration of existing state expertise into other elements, components of the program, including active transportation program when considering active transportation projects, and Strategic Growth Council's own Sustainable Community Strategies planning grants for the planning processes that will move forward. Second, strongly support the SB 535 quad recommendations, which were articulated by Mr. McGavran and Mr. Zisser. Second, associate ourselves with comments by Ms. Merrill to include a requirement that proposed projects demonstrate how they will avoid conversion of ag and open space lands. And finally, associate ourselves with Ms. O'Donoghue that as the program evolves, we urge the SGC to consider open space protection in addition to ag lands as eligible funded projects at the Strategic Growth Council as part of the Sustainable Community Strategies implementation, as well as clarification that the planning funds could also include land conservation to promote integrated GHG reduction strategies. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Hershey, followed by Sarah DeGia.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Hershey, and I'm here representing Housing California and Sustainable Communities for All. And I want to echo all the comments made by my colleagues from the organizations that Chuck just referenced. I'd like to again state that we fully support the staff's proposal. We're really pleased to see that in the trailer bill legislation focusing on housing expenditures, that it's focused on Californians who the market doesn't serve. And lastly, I just want to reiterate the importance of the 535 recommendations and that the Strategic Growth Council should not fund projects that displace our lower income households. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah DeGia, and followed by Mary Rose Taruk.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Council. My name is Sarah DeGia with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, CPEN. I would like to thank the Chair and members on the conversation. I think it's begun to address some of the questions and concerns that we had, and we also submitted a joint letter with several different organizations addressing some of those. And I'd also like to thank the staff of the partner agencies as well as the Strategic Growth Council for the great memo and the information that was put forth today. It's really good to see some of the comments that I'm going to make reflected in the public policy objectives, such as meeting the needs of disadvantaged communities and addressing some of the public health concerns as well. So just a couple things I'd like to highlight from the letter that we sent. We are happy to see that there's going to be workshops. We think that public input is really, really important in this process to make sure that we understand what the needs of the communities are, that they're going to be reflected in the plans that we have moving forward. And we just ask that we make sure that effort is made to reach out in different languages and utilize some of the organizations that have testified here today, because we have a good reach into some of those communities that would be positively impacted by this program. I'd also like to echo the comment that was made by Chairperson, Ms. Morgan, about the need for technical assistance for some of the grantees. Again, some of these organizations and communities may not necessarily have the ability to develop, or they may not be staffed to develop high quality, competitive grant proposals, and so it would be great. And there's a variety of different ways that could happen, and we're happy to have further conversations. Again, health is highlighted in the public policy objectives, but I think it's really, and so I'd like to thank both the staff and the members on that, but I think it's also really important to have consultation with Health and Human Services Agency, the Department of Public Health, and the Health and All Policies Task Force that really have the expertise on what that public health is, in combination with the ARB and some of the other partners that are already named in the trailer bill language. And lastly, this is a great opportunity to meet some of the multiple needs that impact disadvantaged communities who are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And so again, just as we move forward, is making sure that we're looking at how to accomplish those multiple needs at the same time. And just a question to folks, which I didn't see addressed in the presentations today, is who exactly are the eligible applicants and what role community-based organizations or non-governmental organizations play, as well as local health departments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mary Rose Turek, followed by Terry Parker.
Good morning, I'm Mary Rose Turek with the Asian Pacific Environmental Justice Network. We're a 20-year-old environmental justice organization and a leader in the SB 535 coalition that has over 200 leaders across the state serving disadvantaged communities. And we're here to ensure that our climate investments do indeed benefit disadvantaged communities. Our SB 535 coalition priorities have always included affordable transit-oriented development and transit operations. We think that compact living and riding public transit are actually expressions of environmentalism and climate solutions by low-income people. And we want to see you honor and encourage these actions by investing these climate funds into these programs. And so specifically, to include in your in this investment program is around transit-oriented development housing, that these programs should serve primarily very low and extremely low income households. It's integral to have low-income households live in transit-oriented development, as studies show that poor folks actually have ride transit more and thus reduce greenhouse gas emissions more than higher income folks. The second is to make mass transit more affordable and accessible to disadvantaged communities, and so we fully support full or partial discounted transit passes like those for students and those living in affordable housing units. It weans us away from our dependence on oil, so that the Chevrons of the world who are trying to expand, like those from the Richmond Planning Commission last night, that we move ourselves away from that fossil fuel energy. And then lastly, for SB 535, we support the Sustainable Communities for All principles, and that I want to highlight the for all part, that these improvements of and greening actually benefit the most polluted areas of the state, and that these programs are experienced by environmental justice communities. So we urge that your grant funds should be contingent on preventing displacement of lower income households, and that you support low income communities of color to stay and help the state meet and advance our greenhouse gas reduction goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Parker, followed by Anu Natarajan.
Hi, I'm Terry Parker, and I'm representing the nonprofit organization California Walks, which is a proponent of better safety and funding for pedestrian facilities throughout the state. And I just wanted to start by thanking Kate for your slide showing the progression of the development of sustainable communities / smart growth plans, policies, data. And it just made, from a personal note, it made me feel really good because I was directly involved with almost all of those over the years. And it's great to see the progression of how we started out with information, and then we started coming up with programs. And then there was SB 375, and then, taught and infill implementation programs. And now this program. And there's also a lot of quantification work and modeling that was done. And I just wanted to encourage us to build on those prior studies and efforts, of which Mike McCoy was involved with several, and I was involved with when I was with Caltrans, so that we don't go around recreating the wheel, because we don't have time to do that yet again. And that's not necessary, given that we kind of invented this whole thing here in California, which the rest of the country sometimes forgets. So on that note, I'd like to emphasize again the importance of active transportation design and facilities, and I'm going to refer to it as the quadruple bottom line, because when people walk, and everyone is a pedestrian at some parts of our trips. Even if you've parked your car, you have to walk. If you've taken transit, there's the first and last segment of that trip. Even if you're a bicyclist, you still have to walk. So it meets climate and air quality goals. We need to increase safety for vulnerable walkers who do not have a 2,000-pound automobile around them to protect us when we're walking. And there's a lot more funding and work that needs to be done on that throughout the state. It has obvious health benefits of walking, and also provides mobility for all ages, stages, and income levels, and definitely enhances the economic viability of communities. I was fortunate to spend 2.5 months in Europe last summer. I'm retired now, so I get to do that. And believe me, the walkability of Europe attracts visitors who spend lots of money over there in droves. So I think for all those reasons, we need to keep active transportation in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anu Natarajan, followed by Sydney Stone.
I guess I'm the first one to say good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock.
Thank you for that.
I'm Anu Natarajan. I'm here wearing 2 hats. I'm a council member from the city of Fremont, and I also represent Mid-Penn Housing, an affordable housing nonprofit builder. As a council member, I'm really glad that we're getting to a point of implementation. We have planning fatigue. We've been doing all the right things for the last 15 years, and so we're ready to start implementing some of those plans. And as an affordable housing developer, we worked extensively with HCD on their TOD infill programs. So both hats are supportive of the staff recommendation. And we look forward to working with you to provide our input in getting and defining those processes. But more importantly, I think we are here ready and waiting to spend all your money. So
that is
thank
greatly
you.
appreciated.
And just a quick point of reference, the gentleman from Union City pointed out an affordable housing project at their BART station, and Mid-Penn Housing was the one that partnered with the city to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Sydney Stone, followed by Jennifer Whiting.
Hi, I'm Sydney Stone, Housing Manager for the City of Morgan Hill. I'll definitely keep mine pithy because my son really wants to go to lunch, and he's been very patient sitting there through this exciting cap and trade public hearing.
Are you sure we could have him comment? I mean, it's for him in some ways.
Exactly. Really, I'm here just to make the comment about, as you develop the policies and the guidelines, to don't forget small cities. In fact, Morgan Hill is really an example of a city that would be a great test case for integration. We're on the southern edge of Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley. We have been a progressive leader in affordable housing development for 25 years. In fact, more than 1 out of every 10 residential units in the city of Morgan Hill is income restricted in some fashion. We are also surrounded by ag lands that we would dearly love to preserve because it's not only a quality of life, but it's also tourism, it's the economy. And we are intensifying development in our downtown to take advantage of the fact that we have this enormous business park that essentially contributes to the choking of 101 going south and north on both hours of rush, both rush hours. So again, Morgan Hill I think would be a great example for when you integrate preservation, affordable housing, downtown development. We are trying to get our Caltrain station to have more intensive service as well. So again, when you develop the policies and guidelines, don't forget the small communities. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Whiting, followed by Ann Richmond.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Whiting with the League of California Cities, and you've just heard from 2 of my members, so you already know that cities are ready to be your partner and in spending this money. We have been waiting for a long time for implementation money, and we're ready to go. I did want to make a couple comments specific to the hearing today. One, we're very encouraged with the discussion of the council members. We were a little bit concerned with the written staff recommendation. We're very encouraged with the amendment that is proposed, and we would encourage you to support the motion. And I also wanted to comment because 2 very specific existing programs were discussed today, both the TOD and infill investment programs. Our members are fans of those programs. They've done a lot of good in some cities. We would have liked to see more money invested, so we're happy to see that going. But we do have some concerns with how that fits with the disadvantaged communities. One of the characteristics of disadvantaged communities is they are lacking services and infrastructure, updated infrastructure. And you may find that some of the characteristics of disadvantaged communities don't fit with the TOD and infill investment programs. So we're very excited to be part of the public process, and we'll be at the workshops that are planned. Thank you for outlining that schedule, and we'll talk more in depth on those concerns at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Richmond, followed by Rob Weiner.
Hello, my name is Ann Richmond. I'm with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. As the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Bay Area, we look forward to working with the council and with all the partner agencies on implementing these programs, particularly as they can support regional sustainable communities strategies. In the Bay Area, we have a strong focus on affordable housing, transit-oriented development, and supportive infrastructure, and transit support such as operations and capital projects, and we look forward to the Cap and Trade program being able to help support those programs as well. I would also like to mention the disadvantaged communities element of this. MTC has a long history of focusing on equity within the Bay Area, and we look forward to working with the agencies on how the disadvantaged communities element can be applied within these programs, and particularly the applicability of the Cal EnviroScreen model and the various factors therein. Finally, I would just like to thank the agencies for the presentation today to coordinate their efforts and the timelines. Obviously, there are a lot of different elements within these programs, and we appreciate the coordination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rob Weiner, followed by Amanda Eakin.
Good afternoon, Rob Weiner with California Coalition for Rural Housing, close enough, and the Rural Smart Growth Task Force. I'm also here to testify on behalf of Bill Higgins. So
I think he's waived his time.
I would like to reinforce the clear intent of SB 862 is that GHG funds be used not just for affordable housing near transit, but for any affordable housing that reduces GHG. And that could be affordable housing that reduces vehicle miles traveled and increases connectivity to jobs, to transit, to schools, to healthcare, to shopping, and also housing that reduces energy use, that reduces reliance on fossil fuels, that achieves net zero energy. Affordable housing is a leader in both reduction of VMT as well as reduction of energy use. The TOD program is a great program. We support it. The problem is that of the 50 or so awards, only 7 counties out of 58 have benefited. And over 50% of those awards are in 2 counties, Alameda and Los Angeles. Nothing in San Bernardino County, Riverside County, the Inland Empire, the San Joaquin Valley. These are some of the areas with the worst air quality in the country, in fact, in the United States. They are transit poor. They don't qualify for TOD. But they are exemplars of production of affordable housing that reduces VMT and provides for zero net energy. So I would strongly encourage you, as you come up with guidelines, to not forget that 862 applies a very broad definition of what kind of affordable housing can qualify for funds. Secondly, on HCD, HCD has a 40-year history of providing and underwriting loans for housing, but also community development for sewer, water, parks, roads. There's no agency I can think of in the state that is better positioned to administer the housing and community development funds. Moreover, all of the state's housing and community development programs are specifically targeted to low and very low income people. That is the constituency of that agency. So I can't think of a better agency to reposit those funds, and we strongly encourage and support the council's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Eakin, followed by Bill Higgins.
Hi, good afternoon. Amanda Eakin with Natural Resources. I do notice we're in overtime, so if we could just move to penalty kicks, I think we get this all wrapped up pretty quickly. I do want to pull back just for a minute. We talked a lot about the weeds and the details, but just to acknowledge what a major step this has been in the evolution of SB 375. We have a permanent funding source with which to implement this program, the Sustainable Communities and Climate Protection Program. That's something that many of us, probably all of us, worked very hard to accomplish, and it's something that I just hope we can at some point pause and celebrate, that's a wonderful thing to have happen, and now we can all dive into the details together. I do want to commend the SGC staff and the member agency staff for working so expeditiously to make sure we can get these funds out the door, both to implement the SESs, but also to build support for our critical climate program, AB 32. I want to make a couple of remarks, and many of which are highlighted in a letter from Senator Steinberg to Chair Alex that I just wanted to submit into the record as well. First, we were very, very pleased to see the budget trailer language deliberately assign authority over guideline development and fund distribution to the Strategic Growth Council. And it sounds like, I'm pleased that from the conversation today, it sounds like we have consensus that the Growth Council itself should retain the lead role in developing the guidelines and project selection, and that we should clarify through the motion that the role of the implementing agencies is an administrative role, and we should define what that really means. The second point is that given the importance of this program and the expected future revenues, we recommend the SGC revisit the structure. And again, that's a recommendation I've heard support for, happy to hear, after this first $130 million is distributed, and that any decisions we make today apply to just that first $130 million in this year's budget. And that finally, we support the integration of the MPOs more formally into this process, as they are, of course, the agencies charged with implementing SB 375. So we thank you very much for your leadership, and we look forward to working together in partnership to ensure the success of this program.
Thank you. I think Mr. Higgins is left. No. Bill Higgins, followed by. Hang on a second.
And Rob. Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
No, hang on a second. I'm just the next speaker is Andrew Antwith.
I want to thank the other speakers for making my comments for me. And when I came this morning, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to say. I appreciate the motion that has already been made. And then I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm just going to reference it formally for everybody to see Senator Steinberg's letter to you dated this morning that basically has my talking points for me. Hadn't seen it before this morning, but I wanted to touch those 4 points. First of all, it did talk about clarifying the delegation role, which you guys have already done in the motion, and I support that. The second point was developing a more formal role for the MPOs. And I think a point of this, based on the presentation I saw this morning, is there was a flow chart of the state agencies and their responsibilities, and then the next slide said, and we're going to integrate with MPOs. My question is, what does that flow chart look like if it's all on one page? How are we going to work together? They're not two processes, I think that they're one. And I know that's something that we have to develop in the guidelines, and I'm really glad that we had some outreach meetings this morning. I invited and made our executives available, and I look forward to having a roll-up-our-sleeves conversation about that to figure out how to integrate that and how to work it and how to do it best for California. The next point that the senator makes is he points out that this year might be different. There's a rush to get something done by March. And I totally understand that. I agree with it. People need to see a return for their investment in the cap and trade program. But what's good for this year might not be good for 5 years from now, because we want to select the best projects. That's one goal. But as perhaps an even better goal is, how do we set a process that elevates a different kind of project to the selection? How do we provide the certainty for those types of projects to know that they are going to get funding? Because there's even better projects out there that are often left off the planning cycle because they don't have the funding certainty right now in the current paradigm. We need a different paradigm if we're going to hit the 2050 goal. That's a pretty significant goal, to have an 80% reduction out of 2020. And to do it in a way that honors the commitments to disadvantaged communities, air quality, public health, and all the other public policy objectives the administration and the legislature has agreed on, and we're willing to be your partner in implementing. So we need to have a conversation about what that might be in the second year. And finally, there's an emphasis on competition that he makes. And when I looked at the flow chart of the different state programs, I saw there was the Blueprint program, which helped launch our programs. We're very appreciative of. But there was also an active transportation program in there. And I think in there is a nugget of what we could cooperate on. Because in that program, there is a competition, but there's also a regional delegation for those regions that do meet certain requirements to own their own competitions. And that might be a way to struggle with some of these things about regional equity that Phoebe raised, for example. The regions are going to need some kind of certainty with their planning funding to raise and elevate those different types of projects. And so maybe this is a comment more for the governance, but I want to plant that seed now, that we think about how to do that to raise a different kind of project going forward. I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew Antwi, followed by Rachel Iskow. How badly did I screw up your name?
Actually, you did very well.
Okay.
Andrew Antwi here today on behalf of the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. We appreciate your comments and the report that you've made. The staff recommendation and the amendment that's before the commission, we think, help provide some more clarity about how this whole process will work. We've heard a lot about the Strategic Growth Council, but those of us from local government don't know what it's like to work with you. We do know what it's like to work with many of the implementing agencies that have been identified, and there was some discussion about too much money going to LA. I'm here to say on behalf of the City of Los Angeles that you can't send too much money to Los Angeles. It's a big city. There's a lot of people that live there. There's a lot of needs. There is a rail revolution going on in Los Angeles. We are transforming communities. Mayor Garcetti has put a big emphasis on complete streets. I think it's worth highlighting that it's already eligible. We're happy to see it's eligible, but there's planning things that you can do and that do result in collaboration between transportation agencies and with local governments to make the difference at the street level, at the community level, especially for what they call the first mile and the last mile of a trip. And so we very much want to echo that and emphasize that investment in transit-oriented development, in transformative improvements at the community and street level that will encourage biking and walking. We're very much interested in active transportation programs like Bike Share. LA Metro has invested a lot of time in collaborating with the cities. There's 88 cities in LA County. in trying to make sure that the investments are coordinated and that you don't just run the bus or the rail system and let folks either take Uber or take a cab or walk to their ultimate destination, whether it be home or work, or some people even use transit for small trips to cleaners and grocers. So with that in mind, we definitely support the program, and we will be an active part of this process. From the local government perspective, you've laid out some information that's helpful in figuring out how the process will work, but we're still very, very anxious to see more detail about, from a local government perspective, one-stop shopping. Who do we work with and trying to access these grants or loans, depending on the case? And if the Growth Council is going to administer and other departments are going to implement, who do we call? So when you have your meetings around the state, and we're encouraged that you are going to have those meetings around the state, please emphasize that, and we'll be there as well. Thank you.
We appreciate that. LA will certainly be part of our plans. Rachel.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Isco. I'm the CEO of Mutual Housing California, a nonprofit housing developer, and we are a member of the California Coalition of Rural Housing. First, let me say that just like other activities funded by the capping trade, affordable housing development is highly complex, and it's important that the State Department at HCD, with its affordable housing finance and construction background and expertise, implement the affordable housing components of the program. My second issue I'd like to talk about is our very strong concern that the sustainability program, like the state's TOD program, will leave rural, near rural, and Central Valley communities behind, polluted, further impoverished, and without access to healthcare, to healthy, affordable housing. Pollution maps clearly reveal that most of the state's most polluted areas and much of its poverty are in the Central Valley and inland communities, not the coastal communities. If this council narrowly defines eligible housing under this program as exclusively that housing located in close proximity to transit stations, this program will effectively become one more contributor to the two Californian phenomenon, the growing divide between the more affluent coastal communities and the increasingly worse off inland communities with an excess of deteriorated and unhealthy housing and air and water pollution. There are very sophisticated developers, affordable housing developers that work in rural and inland communities against all odds. Mutual Housing is building the first zero net energy housing development in Northern California that's exclusively targeted for agricultural workers and their families. It will be located in Woodland. There is no transit station in Woodland. There is no high-speed transit in Woodland. There is an underfunded bus system with very low service levels. This zero net energy housing development, however, in Woodland will provide an option for agricultural workers and their families to live in healthy housing, live in close proximity to a bus stop, pay less in utility bills, and contribute to the grid through their solar rooftops. This housing, though not TOD, will help reduce greenhouse gas and will help close the green divide and California's own divide. We urge the council to recognize as an eligible use of funds not just TOD housing, but also housing that reduces reliance on fossil fuel through energy efficiency and provides options for high density housing in rural, near rural, and Central Valley communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, are there further comments? We have a motion and a second, and I'm looking for further comments from the council. Secretary Laird.
Just a quick comment. I think it was a great comments. I think they're consistent with the motion. I think we, you know, are starting a process and people get a clear understanding of how it meshes with some of the concerns. I wanted to just make one comment and maybe use the ag land to focus it, and that is because this is new, everybody has a vision for everything that can come from a very limited pot. And so when it was said that ag conservation easements are the most successful way to deal with ag land conservation, that may be true if you have a big pot. But if you don't, because the amount that's available here might get you 2, maybe 3 significant easements in a state of 38 million people that has a just amazing amount of land. If you can figure out a way to take that more limited amount of money and spread the reach much farther in a different mechanism, it makes sense to do the different mechanism. And so that's the challenge we have with this starting. And it's also true with the statement that was made about natural lands money. I mean, the Resources Agency is built around that. We have spent billions of bond money in preserving natural lands in the state. If you look at the average project that is probably funded in natural lands from the Wildlife Conservation Board, the average single project equals the amount of money we have available here for this. So we might be able to do one project if we dedicated every dollar that we have in that pot to doing that. And if we can figure out a way to leverage it or incorporate it or make it spread or reach much further, that's probably what we're going to have to look to do. And I just offer that because if I am a former NGO executive director, and I was very entrepreneurial. Every single time something became available, it managed to fit exactly what my need was. And so I appreciate it totally. But I think we are, as was said, where the rubber meets the road. And I think for me as one member, I'm going to be looking to see how we can leverage this or stretch the reach as far as we can in whatever category it's in.
Okay. Other comments? Secretary Caballero.
Let me just say very, very quickly that I really appreciated all the comments, because this is what it's going to take, a lot of public participation. And you said a lot of the things we've been talking about, but the devil's in the details. So please stay engaged. We're going to need your expertise and your input. It's exciting, actually.
Secretary Ross.
Secretary, I want to echo that, and I especially appreciated how many of our speakers reminded us to remember rural California. It's been a concern of mine, and I know there's only a limited pot of money, but because Secretary Laird and I like to have a competition, who's really the champion for rural California, I was happy to hear so many of you speak to those issues, so thank you.
And I think the division is, I'm the champion for uninhabited rural California.
Secretary Rodriguez.
Just to echo the sentiments of the other members of the council, I appreciate the comments here. And with regard to identification of disadvantaged communities, I do want to assure everybody that we're working hard on that. We do have a tool that we've been looking at, which is EnviroScreen, which has been worked on by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments. I think personally that one of the major benefits of the EnviroScreen effort has been to identify that rural and Central Valley communities are among the most disadvantaged in California. So I think it's a tool that will be useful to the SGC as we move ahead and formulate our plan for spending this cap and trade funding. And we'll invite all of you to participate in the discussion of the identification of disadvantaged communities, which is something that's been entrusted to EPA, but we realize how important that is to this overall equation.
Okay, one quick comment, and then I'll read the entire staff recommendation with the changed language proposal. My comment is that we have $130 million this year. That's in the world of housing and transportation and sustainability and agriculture and rural and et cetera, not that much money. And that going forward, while we have a continuing appropriation, there are a couple of things to say about that. A continuing appropriation is as good as the next budget vote. So keep that in mind. And also, it is not entirely clear for those of us who are thinking about where the future goes as to what amount of money will be from cap and trade as we go forward. So I don't want to be a party pooper, but I want to make sure that we keep a level head, that we understand that this is a lot of money, but it's not enough for all the things that we just heard about, that this process is going to be difficult, and I will echo the comments saying we hugely appreciate your effort and interest and ongoing participation. So let me read the entire staff recommendation that's the subject of the motion and second with the change that was made. The Department of Housing and Community Development within the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency implement the housing, transportation, and infrastructure components of this program, and that the Sustainable Communities Agricultural Land Preservation Program component be implemented separately by the California Natural Resources Agency or the California Department of Conservation. The Strategic Growth Council staff will coordinate collaborative efforts with agency and department staff working with the council to develop program guidelines, including grants and loans, evaluating applications, preparing agreements, monitoring agreement implementation, reporting, and amendments. So that is the motion and the second. Matt, you have a comment?
Just one question. Do we need the word implemented separately do you need the word separately in the reference? I'll ask this of Secretary Laird as well. Which seems to be at odds with the idea of the coordination and consultation later on, and isn't specified in the reference to HCD as well.
Okay, so I will take. How do we procedurally do this? It's a friendly amendment, but do we want to withdraw
I
the?
would just ask the maker of the motion to consider whether we might take that word out. Yeah.
That's fine with the maker of the motion.
And the second? Okay, so we have a friendly amendment with a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there you have it. All right, so that takes care of items 2 and 3. Are there any additional public comments at this time? Seeing none, thank you all very much. We are adjourned for lunch.
It didn't seem like we needed that word in there. It might add to some confusion. So yeah, I think it is. Okay, yeah. And I just wanted to prove to people I read these things.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could just get 10 down and see if then we would have all the lawyers together.
A dangerous
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen. So.